red light should be on.
Yes.
To speakers for you to hear you. And once you click again.
Hi everyone. I'm co-founder of Teyit. Teyit is a fact-checking platform in Turkey, and we do fact-checking basically, but also we do trainings for teachers, students, journalists, and many different groups. So the main disinformation problem is in Turkey, especially during that times, is just huge, like election, like earthquake. Such a crisis just remind us how disinformation affects our lives actually. Sometimes we feel ourselves very hopeless when we just face such a huge problem. But I think in this panel with the great experts, we can discuss today how we can understand this information problem and the relation of conspiracy theories and disinformation. But before introducing our great experts and speakers, I just want to say welcome to Director of the FNF, Beate Appelt. And if you want to speak, please, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Gülin. Good evening and welcome also on behalf of Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. We have the honor and pleasure to support this discussion today, being a long-term partner of Hrant Dink Foundation. For those of you who don't know us, Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom is one of the German political foundations providing civic education, informal education for adults, both in Germany and in international cooperation. We have been working in Turkey for more than 30 years. We have an office here in Istanbul, and we are providing educational projects, research, and dialogue projects together with our partners from civil society and academia. And one of our very dear partners is Hrant Dink Foundation. We have been cooperating on the topic of hate speech for a couple of years now. And we were very happy to see that this branch of work of Hrant Dink Foundation grew into such a huge EU-funded project, which even extends the borders of Turkey into the MENA region, because it covers or addresses one of the very big questions of our time. How can we live together as a society in an informational environment that encourages and amplifies hate speech and disinformation and conspiracies? And when we take the dream of Hrant Dink seriously, and I want to quote him selectively a bit, of living in a world that is free from discrimination, from racism and violence, a world where we listen to each other, a world where we can be different without being turned into the other, and a world where everyone feels like a human being. If we take that serious, then it's actually a must to deal with this topic and to develop solutions. We as Friedrich Naumann Foundation very much share this dream, and as a political foundation with a certain value basis, we are a liberal foundation and freedom is even in our name, we also think we must work on this because hate speech, disinformation, conspiracies, they do not only incite hatred, they also make us unfree. They take the freedom of us to make reasonable decisions, and they take the freedom of us as citizens because they make us subject to manipulation. Therefore, I'm really grateful to Hrant Dink Foundation as an influential and big NGO in Turkey to work on this topic in a very professional way with a lot of dedication and creativity. I congratulate you to having selected these wonderful experts from different parts of the world. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your inputs and the discussion. Thank you to Hrant Dink Foundation for the great cooperation, and thank you all for coming also from our side.
Thank you. And now we can just maybe introduce speakers. So Dan is the Senior Manager of Education Design at the News Literacy Project and is the lead researcher and writer for Rumorguard. And I think you, just in the presentation, you probably mentioned about more what are you doing in the News Literacy Project, of course. So Mariam Gersamia is a professor and a media psychologist at Tbilisi State University. And Erkan, Saka, as a professor of media and journalism studies at the School of Communication at Istanbul Bilgi University. So just before just pass the floor, the speakers, I just want to ask a question to you, actually. Is there anyone here something like contorium element? Do you? Yeah. Actually, 34% of Turkish society believe that there is an element under the Bosphorus. And the foreign powers don't let us to dig and get this element. So it's actually worth $17 billion. So actually the number is huge. Almost half of the society somehow believe there is an element in Turkey, in Bosporus, and that the foreign powers don't let us. So this kind of information actually just everyone just believes such a conspiracy theories in a different sense. So I think in Turkish case, very similar with other countries, I'm sure. So actually, of course, there isn't any element called contorium. Actually, this story is just made up one guy, and he just wrote a story about the so-called element in 2009, and then in 2011 just spread all over the internet, just because many different media organizations mentioned about this element. So I think it just shows us and give us an idea how effective such a conspiracy theories and our actually feelings, our nationalistic feelings. So I want to ask then, so how we just understand these conspiracy theories, how we should just define such a conspiracy theories, and how misinformation just affect to believe more such a conspiracies.
Yeah, conspiracy theories, they appeal, they appeal to us a lot. It keeps going off. They rise, oh my gosh. Conspiracy theories. People like to believe these things because sometimes they're fun, sometimes they appeal to our anxieties. Something about an element being lost in the river, it's an era of mystery that people want to solve or want to take part in. And with these false claims that they get repeated over and over, and during that constant exposure, you start to believe them. So you might hear it once and you might be able to dismiss it, but when it goes viral and your friends are talking about it, or you see it over and over, it's easy to believe them.
Yeah, great. So how do you manage conspiracy theories, or what do you suggest to actually your audiences to tackle with conspiracies? If you want, you can just skip the presentation if you want. You want to show, yeah, if you want, you can.
Just go into it?
Yeah, okay.
Well, I'll hit on that a lot in my presentation,
Okay.
so I'll start with that. So I'm Dan Evon from the News Literacy Project, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the Hrant Dink Foundation for inviting me here today. And I want to talk to you about conspiracy theories and also how misinformation feeds into them. Are we not showing? Okay. Sorry for the rough start. There we go. So I work for the News Literacy Project. I'm the Senior Manager of Education Design, where I lead research and writing for the Rumor Guard. Before this, I worked as a fact checker for about a decade. And in that time, I encountered a lot of misinformation, and I found that false claims often lead people into conspiracy theories. And not only does it introduce them to it, it reinforces those ideas. And even when false claims are not about a specific conspiracy theory, it encourages us to practice conspiratorial thinking. So the News Literacy Project is a nonprofit education organization that works with schools to teach critical thinking. And while they are primarily focused on the school system, we recently launched the Rumor Guard, which is a public-facing outlet. So I've been a fact checker for a long time, and one of the things that I found is that providing people corrective information doesn't have all that much of an impact. We need to teach people fact-checking skills so they can assess these claims on their own. And that's what we're trying to do with the Rumor Guard. This is a fact-checking site, but at the same time, we try to provide media literacy lessons. So we take a trending news story, we tell people if it's true or false, but then we also teach them a skill like a reverse image search, or give them some terminologies to help them talk about these things and to address future claims so that they can make these decisions on their own. Sorry for the things. We also emphasize these 5 factors. We want people to keep these in the back of their head when they're scrolling online to help protect themselves against false claims and from falling into conspiracy theories. We want them to ask them if they're authentic, if it's been posted by a credible source, what's the evidence behind the claim, is the context accurate, and is it based on solid reasoning? So, what is a conspiracy theory? Generally speaking, it's an unfounded explanation of an event that relies on faulty logic. It often runs counter to mainstream opinion, and like the example you were giving earlier, it asserts some secretive group that is hiding something from us. Not all conspiracy theories will do that, but that is a common trait throughout. So these are some of the conspiracy theories that you're going to find online, and you separate them into their own individual ideas, but there's also a lot of overlap. This is a monological belief system, and that means when you believe one of these theories, it often serves as evidence for the others. So if you think that there are microchips in the vaccines, you might think that the government is planning the pandemic, which might lead you to believe that there's a secret world order of the Illuminati. So these are all their own separate entities, but at the same time, they combine together to kind of create one overarching worldview. So here's some stats about just how widespread these beliefs are. We typically think of conspiracy theories as fringe beliefs, and in a lot of ways they are. That's not the majority of the population, but millions of people subscribe to these ideas. The lowest one on here, that the moon landing was faked, is 10% of the United States population. And that's not a huge number, but it's 30 million people. So 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot of people that subscribe to these ideas. So why do we believe in these theories? Conspiracy theories provide us with simplified answers, specifically to questions of how certain crisis situations emerge, which societal actors can and cannot be trusted. So about a decade ago, there was a school shooting in the United States that involved the murder of a lot of children. And at the time, people started claiming that it was a false flag event. And a false flag is the belief that something has been staged by the government. So instead of believing that this terrible event occurred, they invented this alternate explanation. This often follows in traumatic events where people just don't want to accept the truth of the matter. So they come up with an alternative that is more palatable to them. Here are some of the other reasons why people might subscribe to conspiracy theories. And one thing that I think is important about this list is to consider how it applies to your own life, because these sort of traits, they're not reserved strictly for conspiracy theorists. We all can fall victim to these things. I've been a fact checker for 10 years, and I still fall for misinformation. And when I do, it's usually because a social media post appeals to a certain bias, where I can rush through my social media feed and I can be fooled, hopefully momentarily, but it still happens. So this is a quote from Kelly Wheel, who wrote a book on the flat earth conspiracy theory called Off the Edge. And she writes that conspiratorial thinking is not a weird pathology. It's experienced by some and absent in others. It's part of a mental process hardwired into all of us. Rather than languish in the unknown, we tell ourselves stories about the secret causes of our troubles. And all of us do that. So, is this a modern issue? I think we'll get into a lot about how social media has exacerbated this problem. Social media has really put a megaphone in everyone's hands, and these theories can reach farther and quicker than they ever have before. But a lot of the ideas that we're dealing with today, we've been dealing with for centuries. The flat earth conspiracy theory is one example, that There's been an uptick recently in people who subscribe to this belief, but it's nothing new. Now, I always thought flat Earth had to do with the age of exploration. I thought that people, when they set sail across the world, that they were literally afraid of falling off the edge of the Earth. And that turns out that that's a myth. This can actually be traced back to the 1900s, to basically one man named Samuel Robotham, who was a commune leader. And this took place during the Second Industrial Revolution, when society was going through a lot of different changes, and he didn't like people's reliance on these new technologies. He also didn't like the explanation that the Earth was surrounded by stars and planets, and that it was in the middle of this galaxy, because he believed that that didn't leave room for God. There was no room for heaven or earth in the round Earth theory. So he invented something else. He invented a theory that fit his beliefs. And once he decided that truth, he went out and searched for evidence to prove it. And that's something that we call motivated reasoning. And it's really common in all conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theorists often work backwards. They decide something is true, and then they find evidence to support it. So this is prevalent through a lot of different theories. This is about the Challenger explosion, but we don't have to get into detail there. I also want to talk about the anti-vax movement. And we have all spent the last few years dealing with the pandemic, and that's caused a lot of societal changes. It's caused a lot of uncertainty, and it's seen a explosion in anti-vax conspiracy theories. But these theories aren't really anything new. They've been around since vaccinations have been around. This photo is from England in the early 1900s. And I like showing this photo because it really shows the power of vaccinations. For one, the boy on the left was not vaccinated during a smallpox outbreak, and the boy on the right was. And it also shows the danger of misinformation. This was not an accident. His parents made a deliberate choice not to get vaccinated because they were swept up in the anti-vaccination movement of the time. So let's talk about the connection between misinformation and conspiracy theories. And if we think of conspiracy theories as a overarching belief system, the misinformation that we all come across on social media is the fuel that feeds those beliefs. So misinformation, it serves as an entry point into conspiracy theories. It provides fabricated evidence to support them. It fills the information gap, which provides a fertile ground for conspiracy theories to spread. And, sorry if these keep skipping. And it's relentless and repetitive, which makes us feel that a false claim is true. So one thing that conspiracy theorists and purveyors of misinformation are very good at is inserting their talking points into trending topics. Whenever there's a breaking news story or a current event, there's bound to be false claims that follow it. So this is a theory that emerged shortly after the war in Ukraine, when world leaders started implementing sanctions, and people were worried about supply issues and oil prices, and there was this fear of food shortages. So purveyors of misinformation capitalized on that by trying to create a pattern of these fires that were taking place at food processing plants. There wasn't a pattern. A lot of these stories were exaggerated, and if you looked at the trend from the years before, there wasn't an increase in fires. But a lot of people believed this, and their initial exposure to this idea, they probably were not aware that they were also being exposed to the Great Reset theory, which is the idea that a secretive global group is purposely causing everything from food shortages to lockdowns in an attempt to enslave humanity. So people saw this and likely believed it because of world events, and they were exposed to this conspiracy theory. Misinformation is also all over the internet. It's not just news or politics, but you can find false claims in sports, in the wellness community, in the entertainment industry. I like this example because, the Simpsons example, because it's humorous, and you can see why people would spread it online. It's a joke. And humor is a great way to spread false claims. People want to spread jokes with their friends. It goes viral online. But these memes, they also plant conspiratorial ideas. You can dismiss this claim as false. You can show the genuine screenshot versus the fabricated one, but it still plants that idea into people's heads. So not only do false claims introduce people to conspiracy theories, but they're also used to support them. There's a big talking point now in the United States about the war in Ukraine being faked, and that it doesn't exist. And you obviously cannot support that claim with evidence because it's not true. So how do you spread that idea? You have to generate false claims. So people use misinformation to support these ideas. Misinformation also fills in the information gap. It takes a while for credible information to spread, and misinformation, there's no barrier to entry. There's no, you don't have to find factual information. You don't have to find sources. You can just make up a claim and spread it. This is a quote from American author Mark Twain, that's "A lie can make it halfway around the world before the truth has time to put its boots on." Now, Mark Twain never actually said this, but it's always attributed to him, and when you see that quote often enough, it becomes true. It seems like it was something that he said. So here's an example of the misinformation gap in action. This was a story about a football player who collapsed during a game in January. And I'm not sure if you have seen similar claims, but whenever there was a celebrity death or an athlete collapse, people would immediately blame it on the vaccines. So within seconds of this person collapse, his name is Damar Hamlin, within seconds of him collapsing, people started claiming that it was due to the vaccine. They obviously had no support for that assertion, but on the other side, journalists didn't really have any information to push back on. That information just wasn't available. We didn't know why he collapsed. So you had one side claiming that it was the vaccine, and you had the other side claiming, oh, we don't know. And you can see why one of those arguments is more appealing. Misinformation is used to fill that information gap. A few weeks later, Damar Hamlin, he survived. He showed up at a football game, and then people started claiming that he had a body double. So still, we didn't know the real true reason for his collapse. And in the place of that credible information, people spread more conspiracy theories and more false claims. The final post here is from April, which is 3 months after this incident took place. And we finally found out what happened. He suffered a rare heart condition called commotio cordis, which is when in a regular heartbeat, he was hit in the chest just at the right moment when he was experiencing a heartbeat. And that caused him to go into cardiac arrest. So that's 3 months of not having credible information. And in that time, it was filled with false claims and conspiracy theories. And the final point I'd like to point out is that misinformation is relentless and it's repetitive. As a fact checker, you address individual claims. And when you tell somebody that something is false, inevitably another claim is going to pop up that is going to take its place and it's going to spread the same idea. So you can correct information, but people are going to be exposed to the same ideas over and over and over again. They're probably going to be exposed to the same claims. And the purpose of misinformation often is not to convince people whether something is true. It's to convey this larger truth. So while an individual claim might be false, when you hear similar things over and over again, you start to believe it. This is something that our brain just does. We mistake familiarity with accuracy. And this is something known by the world's most famous propagandist and Nazi leader Adolf Hitler, who said, "For the grossly impudent lie always leaves traces behind it, even after it has been nailed down." So that means that when you're exposed to misinformation, even when it gets corrected, there's still something that lingers behind. And when you get exposed to it often enough, you start to believe it. So when we look at the connection between false claims and conspiracy theories, we can see that it's a bit of a cycle. People are exposed to false claims. It creates doubt. that leads them to be curious about conspiracy theories. Then they seek out evidence, and what do they find? They find more false claims. If I was a better graphic designer, I would have made this a spiral, because as the cycle continues, you just get sucked deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. So what do we do about it? I want to talk about this briefly on 3 points. And the first is at the systematic level, and that's mainly with social media companies. They've taken steps recently to address misinformation, but almost everything they do is reactive. You'll find a false claim online, and it'll be tagged with a fact check or a community note. But the algorithm still rewards misinformation. People are still exposed in the millions to these false claims, and the fact checks come much later, and less people see them, and there needs to be a change on that level. Conspiracy theories also aren't confined to social media. We have world leaders that share these ideas, that they campaign on these ideas, and we need journalists to be prepared to push back on those claims and not just let these ideas flourish in the public. The next is on the individual level. Studies have shown that people are much more likely to be receptive of corrective information when it comes from a friend or a family member or somebody they trust. When they encounter a fact check online, it's very easy to dismiss it out of hand, partly because a lot of misinformation seeks to discredit credible news sources. So they'll encounter a fact check and they just won't believe it. So it's important to, if you have people in your life that believe conspiracy theories, to talk with them. And lastly is education. I joined the News Literacy Project after a decade of fact-checking because corrective information just doesn't do enough to stop the spread. We need people to learn fact-checking skills on their own. So when they encounter these claims, that they can address them and they can see how people are trying to manipulate them. So here's some stats from the News Literacy Project's Checkology course. And Checkology is something that we implement in schools, and we try to teach students critical thinking skills. And in the last quarter, we found that students who completed this course, there was a 15% increase in the amount of students who could recognize when a claim wasn't supported by evidence. And I'm not showing this to tout the News Literacy Project success here, but more to demonstrate that education is the most powerful tool that we have to push back against misinformation and conspiracy theories. And that's my presentation, and hope you all enjoyed that.
Thanks, Dan. And as you mentioned about the information gap part, you said that no barriers for the entry point for the conspiracy theories. It's just it's really important because someone just made up stories, and as millions of people just believe this. So I just want to ask Mariam. So how we just believe these theories in a just really, maybe I can say this, shitty stories. And it's just, what is the mechanism and how media organizations and this achieve to just make us believe. So what is the mechanisms behind this? So, yeah. I need for the presentation.
First of all, thank you for invitation and for this brilliant audience. And once again, I want to reiterate again and again gratitude to Naumann Foundation, big family of Naumann Foundation, which constantly teaches us in difficult situations how to protect our rights, human rights, our freedoms, and we constantly learn from each other. And what Dan was now talking about, I was really fascinating that in different countries all around the globe, we think about the things that unites us. We think in a very similar way how to find solutions and what are the topics that we really address. And this gives another hope, you know, that we are so much connected, even if we don't know each other so well or just meet 1 hour before. we are still connected because there are some topics that we are constantly trying to find a better solutions. So from my perspective, as I'm currently the professor at Tbilisi State University. I work for Transparency International Georgia. It's a non-governmental organization. And I'm a media psychologist. I will discuss these conspiracy theories and the disinformation effect from that point. Media is a relatively new phenomena to our brain. What we see, actually, we are evolutionarily primed in that way that what we see is the reality. Even when we watch movies and we know that it's staged, it's not reality, still we are emotionally engaged, our heartbeat, or imagine when you, if you are a gamer or used to play, how much engaged you are. It almost feels physiologically, you feel everything as it is in reality. So for brain, it is a challenge. For brain, it is a challenge because it really cannot distinguish where is the fake, what he sees, and where is, on a cognitive level, yes. We all know that the character, what we see in the movie, is a character. But when we see this character in the street, our brain tells that this is not an actor, but this character, you can approach him and talk. Oh, you know, I liked the way you told this guy in the movie and discuss the scenarios. And he might say that I'm just an actor. But you really believe that this is parasocial interactions, dialogue which you have with this character is real. It's an interesting phenomena in media psychology, and how we create the images in our mind and then believe, and actually how our memory is structured, because we don't have the camera in our mind which records everything, and when we want to remember something, we can scroll back. No, it doesn't work like that. When we remember something, it's absolutely reframed, already reframed. We might retell the story which happened to us, but it might not be similar as it was in reality. So in that way, how do you see? Okay, now I'm from a media psychological perspective, it's the nature of disinformation and conspiracy theories is what impacts really on our health, first of all. It impacts on our emotions and also on our memories. And I will show you some examples of this conspiracy propaganda from Russia, then the patterns of influence to Georgian and Ukrainian population, and then the solutions which we can find out. So again, disinformation, this is a Russian coined word. It's not a misinformation, or it's a relatively new word than propaganda, for example. And it is connected with what Goebbels actually used to say, that the truth should be used as frequently as possible. That means that disinformation might be not a fabrication or false information. Everything might be truth in disinformation, only 1%, or the combination of the sentences, or the context might be distorted. And that's why it's confusing. And if you split these sentences and analyze it one by one, you might find nothing wrong with it. And that's why we swallow this information and we cannot digest it in a proper way. And the powerhouse of propaganda and disinformation is the hate speech. hate speech. So there are some factors, of course, of conspiracy theories communication, which Dan told about the social networks, internet. They're using that. Psychological, it depends who the person is and in what society. Actually, he has developed his skills. Political, sociopolitical and social factors, and distrust toward democratic institutions, which is actually one of the main factors of creating the image of the country, image of the nation, how institutions work during the crisis. If we are constantly trying to somehow discredit politics, media, science, then it's more easy for people to believe in conspiracy theories because it's somehow correlated. And especially during the crisis, when rational goes down and emotional, we are more engaged emotionally because physiologically we are primed in that way that in the crisis we don't think, we have to survive. So emotions and our neural system works in a very different way. And in such situations, of course, emotions matter. Pandemics, wartime, these are the situations. And what Dan mentioned about information gaps, that's very interesting point here, that disinformation and conspiracy theories affect more on the topics we know nothing or we know little about. For example, if we don't know anything about how viruses work, maybe we don't know, then we might memorize the information about 5G. So we want to find solutions. Our brain wants to find solutions, and it swallows and memorizes. It doesn't have any filter. It doesn't have any prepared mindset for that topic. One of the topics during the Russia's war in Ukraine was the history of Ukraine. And the history of Ukraine, which Russia was constantly falsificating, I realized that I know nothing about the history of Ukraine. And somehow I was retelling the stories, which then I find out that was Russia's narrative. But this was only because I was not prepared for digesting this information. And that's why it's very important to be ahead of the disinformation and conspiracy theories, to have a media literacy, to have an education, before it targets us as a population. So this is the connection between memory, media, disinformation. Disinformation targets our emotions, our basic emotions which we have, and if it targets our emotions, it targets our health. We have the resilience, but we have the resources, limited resources. We cannot digest everything, and if there is too much informational effect on us and pressure, we as the human beings are acting differently to survive. We find simple solutions, we skip the information, and we cannot change it. The evolution does not change as quickly as technologies. So I might need the third hand for my smartphone, but you know, I only have two, and it wouldn't I wouldn't have that because of this evolution that we went through. So neural system, which we have, also primed in a way that during the stress, we burn all the resources we have, and we need some rest then and some positive emotions to build our resilience. So disinformation affects in stress and crisis situations more on us, because we are not controlling mentally everything. We rely on our emotions, and we are more open, we are more vulnerable. And the more stress we have, more influence on our memory. So the emotions and conspiracy theories are connected. As we have 4 basic emotions, every human being which is born, it has anger, sadness, disgust, because it's very important to survive. We should have these emotions. And there is one emotion, positive emotion, joy, which is in one basket. So negative emotions are differentiated in our mind. We memorized all these emotions during millions of years. We know how to react on it because we want to survive. As to the positive emotions, well, positive emotions are good for our resilience, but they're not so much engaging us physiologically. So why do we watch the negative news? Here is the answer. Because when our brains react to anger, for example, when I watch Putin, of course I don't love him, I don't believe in him, but when I watch him, I have an anger, I have a disgust, I have a sadness, oh my God, disappointment. I have a fear. That's the goal. So I'm engaged. I want to listen to it. If something good happens, I might skip it. When people are angry on media, why they are showing us the negative news and why people are so much engaged, why negative news have so much ratings and reposts, it's natural. It's natural. And when we react on something that happens, we cannot change it. So we must take this into consideration because of our survival instincts work like that. But conspiracy theories and disinformation, they, of course, use this pattern which we have to spread the information and to engage us and to choose the target groups, the enemies. We release our anger and aggression, and the storytelling has this negative framing. How memory then reacts to that is this, the conspiracy theorists try to influence the subconscious level. First of all, it tries to show confusion, tries to combine the sentences that are not compatible with each other. And our brain says, how does these two things connect with each other? That's enough for influence. When we have confusion and when our mind cannot decide how to structure something and how to memorize something, it's very difficult for our brain. That's why it loses the control physiologically and says, okay, I give up. And that's how we memorize. Then it's easy to swallow it. We skip it, actually, but we memorize it. The next one is the spiral of fear, what you have just mentioned, the spiral, which means that if X happens, then Y will happen, and this is horrific. For example, if Putin will be defeated, then the horrific 90s will return in Russia, and that will be horrific. Or if X and Y happens, and this is horrific, and then that occurs, and this will be the same, but even worse. Chernobyl, for example, everyone remembers in Ukraine Chernobyl, and this pattern of fear of this spiral was built like that, that if we start responding to the war, then Putin might use nuclear weapons, and that will be even worse as it was in Chernobyl. And this spiral, you might not believe. If you are a politician, even discuss it, but we're all afraid. That's the target, fear, to create this fear atmosphere. In this regard, I'm thinking, and I also want to know the what our colleagues are thinking about this. Artificial intelligence, how artificial intelligence and these deep fakes might affect our mind, which will see a lot of stories as reality, and it will be very difficult for our mind to digest it as a false story, because this is absolutely new challenge for human brain. Lack of knowledge, lack of education. Media is our informal educator during the whole life, and not only important what we know, but what we do not know, because conspiracy theories try to find that. Storytelling is used. This is unfinished stories, and we are constantly trying to find out. I will Google what you have just said about that in Bosphor, what was this element. I will try to, because I want to complete this story. My mind wants to complete this story. But conspiracy theories never say the completed stories. And we watch it as a movie, series, as a game. So we are engaged in that. And this is another the thing that we should consider. So what Russia tries to sell to us is that conspiracy theories, you always have the enemy, someone. They are responsible for all the tragedies we have in our life. So Russia tries to demonize West and US. For example, in Georgia and Ukraine, it was West who was behind the color revolutions. Not we, not Georgians and Ukrainians, because these, that's how Russians used to say, these poor people cannot make the revolutions. Of course they cannot, they don't know how to make. Of course, United States and West, they did, they invest, they made this possible. And people, they had no choice. They didn't want it, but they didn't have a choice. So, and people believe in that. So in this regard, they link that Russia must protect these citizens, these Ukrainians, release them from these fascist regimes of Zelensky or something, and Russian citizens also, who are the minority. And that's how they created this is the conspiracy theories and the whole set of doctrine, Ruski Mir, Russian civilization, which is versus West. So they are manipulating and demonizing the target groups. Especially they are demonizing those who are opinion makers, elite, and they're labeling them as agents. And in 1937, we observed how thousands and thousands of people have been shot because they were labeled as foreign agents, and they were exiled, and this was the tragedy. But in 2023, we had in Georgia, now the challenge, the law was initiated against CSOs and media and labeling them as agents. And we really tried a lot to somehow to stop it. So the fear of spiral works in a way that if West, who wants chaos, will defeat Russia, which means Putin, which means Russia for them, that means that the West will have control under Russia and Russia will be disintegrated. And people believe in that fear. So the pattern again works in a way that the world order is too complicated to understand because there's so many information we can't analyze. And the brain, which tries to find the simple solutions. Here is the conspiracy theories, very simple, populistic. And in these theories, you are not responsible for everything, for outcome. They are responsible, someone, and we can blame them. So there is a confusion in the story, local or political crisis, pandemic, war, lack of information, emotional impact, And of course, the solution is the conspiracy theory, we and they, and this populistic discourse which we have. So here are my last slides, where there are some stories, Georgia and Ukraine. Opposition and civil society organizations in Georgia are backed with radicals and want chaos, for example. The same was Ukraine. The Ukrainian government is controlled by neo-Nazis and fascists, and they are a threat to minorities, which are Russians. For example, Georgia bombed its own territories to blame Russia. The same. The crash of Malaysian Airways was staged by Ukraine, then to blame Russia. Georgia did not exist as a state and was created by Russia in the previous century. Abkhazia was never part of the Georgia. So Crimea, the same. Crimea historically belongs to Russia. And Kievskaya Rus, it doesn't exist. It was Russia, actually, and a lot of stories linked with that. Rose Revolution and Maidan protests were orchestrated by the West, and during pandemics, in Georgia created biological weapon in Lugar laboratory, which was financed by the United States of America. And in Ukraine, shortly after Russia's invasion, US was running a secret bioweapon labs close to the Russia's border. So, and if you know nothing about that, you might really believe. So the solution is, of course, to be informed, and to be informed. Today is the Press Freedom Day, World Press Freedom Day. In Georgia, a lot of journalists are under pressure. The manager of the opposition media outlet is under arrest. So struggle a lot to protect media freedom. And I hope that we can impact. But in this context, fighting with disinformation and conspiracy theories is one of the most challenging topics. And thank you again for the floor.
Thank you. I have some questions, of course, to you, but in the second round, during the question part, I can just skip. But to be informed part, maybe, and also you mentioned about, also you, Dan, and you mentioned about the information gap. And if we don't have any information about any topic, so we can just open our hearts to just getting in whole conspiracy theories. I totally understand this, but I think in this digital age, the problem is, especially the social media platforms or search engines, just make us, and like, we started to think like, oh, I can learn everything from internet. The problem is actually started there, I guess. So we think that all information there, and I can just get this information and learn something.
But we don't have time for it.
Yes,
yeah?
Don't have time, and also it doesn't mean we are informed, actually, because we are just all information just illusion. And just, yeah, sometimes illusion and just so much information. And another thing is, among all this information, we just sometimes see the negative ones, because the doom scrolling, again, the part of strategy of the social media platforms. So we cannot all the time escape from this. But the other topic is really important about the distrust, and how in the conditions like distrust to the information and authoritative information like state. Like you have to believe very basic states data, for example, inflation. So I just give the floor to Erkan. So we just live in the countries like no one believe anything, no one trusts each other. And the problem is, I think, as Mariam mentioned, more stress make us more vulnerable. So I think in Turkey we have some stressful times, Erkan. So how is these conspiracy theories affect, especially maybe Turkey? You can mention about this.
Well, I will try. I was thinking about this terminological issue. What's the relationship between conspiracy theories and disinformation? We used it mostly here also interchangeable, and they are definitely connected. I will just provide a sort of an operating definition. It seems that you can challenge me, or also you are all you can challenge me. Like conspiracy theory is a narrative. Sometimes I think of Roland Barthes' mythologies. It's a bigger thought system that gives meaning to something, to social life. In the meantime, what we mean by disinformation, they are elements of this, parts of this bigger narrative. So even if we work on it and challenge the disinformation, as long as the narrative is there, the elements will change, will be replaced, but the narrative will continue to have impact on us. And I'm thinking of here as a negative, so we mostly think about conspiracy as negative, so there will be some negative impact on society as long as these narratives are maintained. And as we all know, also in Turkey, but globally, there are narratives like that. People need to give meaning to life. And conspiracies are there to provide some meaning. So it is a meaning question in a way. And even if we fact check, it doesn't really fix the meaning question. In the meantime, I am definitely for fact checking. I don't want to be misunderstood. Just that I would like to show the big picture or broader frame. And I'm here for sort of now, I seem to be supporting conspiracy theories. I will pretend to support, not support exactly, but again, I try to provide a bigger picture, broader frame, in the sense that, in fact, we deserve this moment. It's been around for decades. There is an information disorder. There are many parts that contributed to the current information disorder. During the Cold War, you know, it was a paranoid state. In fact, Cold War has really contributed so many, especially political conspiracies. And retrospectively, we see that some of them were true. We said that they were conspiracies, but they were not. So things are so complicated. We accuse of conspiracies, but sometimes they are not. And gradually, by 1970s and 80s, the decline of institutions, especially intellectual sources of information, they are in decline. I mean, climate crisis was first really discovered in a way in 1970s, but several sources of capital just prevented that information to circulate. And instead they said there's nothing, you know, there's no climate crisis. You can also imagine the tobacco companies and all in 1960s. And every decade, institutions declined and trust issues emerged. Now, yes, we definitely, I mean, this information disorder has a very big issue with the trust to institutions, but those trust was lost for many years ago, in a way. So we are in a mess, basically. It's important to point out the problem, then we will work on it. But we have to see that this is not only today's problem. It took a long while. And now, of course, in addition to all these problems, and there comes there comes a new media. And the last version is social media, which I love. And I promote it all the time. I continue to promote. But in the beginnings of social media, there was this discussion on, for instance, participatory culture, which was great. And one aspect of participatory culture was that it just destroyed the expert paradigm. In fact, expert paradigm was already destroyed, but we also contributed as part of participatory culture. So every citizen could produce content as citizen journalist or citizen science or citizen blah blah, lots of. It took a while. It was all good, but then we begin to see that, well, if everyone contributes, this will. This is not all. They don't always contribute positively, and in addition to all existing institutional crises, etc., now we also have the issue that every citizen can contribute to disinformation. And they can also contribute to creation of new conspiracy theories, new narratives. In this, as we are in a mess and is in a confusion, then anyone can compete, and anyone can really contribute. Not only the elites or the institutions, but everyone. So now we are in such a state, and so it's hard to counter. The elements of conspiracy theories as disinformation. I'm not saying it's totally we are helpless. Of course, there are hopes, signs of hopes, and there are some systemic challenges going on. At least we now try to figure out. For instance, the quality journalism, for instance, even they were despised, but now we realize that we need them. But we have to underline that even the quality journalism once made big mistakes. They are the cause of their own decline, trust in the trust. You can easily, just a decade ago, they all supported a war in Iraq. And so there are, of course, so many examples. So what I try to say that is, so we live in this broader information disorder, and there will be narratives all the time, and we need to provide also narratives, counter narratives. I'm not saying let's create also new disinformation, but I think the history showed that there can be challenging counter narratives, new meanings of life, which do not need to be based on disinformation issues. So this is my broader argument. Apart from that, also, when you look at the literature, let me just, my colleagues already, I think here, mentioned most of the issues, and I will not repeat them. I just want to state that, for instance, most of the literature shows like isolated people, some kind of disenfranchisement, or some individuals are more susceptible to conspiracies because they are not educated, etc. They do not have enough critical perspective, blah, blah, which are all true. But I would like to ask you, how many of you have been to a fortune teller? I ask this question all the time. You know, in my history of taught course, half of the class goes. And I say enlightenment is already dead. You know, I know that you go to a fortune teller, falcı, just for fun, but it is a sign, you know. Most of us go there, and I'm not even talking about astrology, which is a big knowledge system there. I'm surprised. I admire how such a unscientific thing can become such a big systematic knowledge, and it happened anyways. And I will basically stop there before also stating, as an academic, of course, education is important. That's, in fact, academia is also losing its impact and trust. And so I need to find a job. So I think education is important. And there may be, in addition to the diversity, I think one thing still fuels all the conspiracies, and they are to some extent true, that most of the content or media production was sort of elitistic. And that's now, we need some diversification. By diversification, I'm not saying that everyone should just put every kind of information. We need credibility, but diversity is beyond the cliches is nice. I can give some very strange examples too, like how, you know, for instance, porn detecting software, if there is no diversity in those coders who are building porn detecting software, then they will forget to put male bodies there, which happened, as a research showed, because most of the time those software are built by heterosexual white American boys, so they don't even imagine that male bodies like penis can be part of the pornographic image, and as a research shows. So we need diversity at every levels. And as united approach and more systematic approach, we should point out. And one thing also, maybe it's the second one is important. It is an industry already. I mean, in Turkey, it's not that open, but disinformation, people just benefit from it. And not only indirectly, but directly. So while we fight a intellectual fight, there's some also, there might be some fight commercially, or you know, in some more financial terms, it's possible. And I'm done here. Then maybe with the next conversational level, we can continue.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And is there any question from there, or Zoom maybe? Here. And then here. First you, and then just.
I would like to thank all the panelists for the information they gave. In fact, whatever we heard here could be a very good handbook for conspirators and propagandists. We are teaching them how to operate with all these things, by the way. Now, regarding information, nobody has the monopoly on truth. That is the problem. When you see, for instance, the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, Russia resorts to disinformation, but Ukraine also could resort to disinformation. In fact, it's so difficult to fight disinformation only with truth. So therefore, they use the same tools as well. And then we, the public, don't know where the truth is generally. So we have to take with a grain of salt and always check whatever we have in hand. As you said, information, etc. So whenever we see something which is not logical, we have to check, we have to dig. And I think that people have to be as bold as the liars to confront them publicly to fight disinformation, because people are afraid to fight disinformation, especially when it comes from governments subsidized sources. So people are afraid and they just shut up. So they have to be as bold as them to confront them. And then there is the problem of anonymous claims. When people we don't know people. They say anything in the social media, and they are not afraid because they don't disclose their identity. If we knew who they were, they would be much more, let's say, attentive to not disseminate lies. And there have been very interesting films as well. I would suggest the film Wag the Dog, which was played by Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro, showing how governments are making disinformation. I really suggest you to see that film. And normally in disinformation, we see that they make suggestions like ad hominem attacks. They attack people rather than their ideas. They discredit people, so you discredit as well the ideas when you discredit people. And let me see. Yeah. Now we have to see how to fight disinformation, and is it possible to fight it only with truth? That's the problem, because truth gallops, lies gallop very fast, and truth takes a lot of time, like the false quote of Mark Twain you said, but it's a good quote anyway, even if it doesn't belong to him. So what we have to do, we have to also to sponsor accredited sources of information, and that is the job of academics, I think, to inform people who are the right sources, because we are overwhelmed by misinformation, disinformation, and you name it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
First, thank you all for your presentations. I want to ask about authority of social platforms. As you know, for example, if you are CEO of Twitter, you can ban Trump for if you think his words are wrong information, you can ban him from Twitter. I found it very dangerous. Or if you are Mark Zuckerberg, you can just, I don't know, you can just, you can just spread one particular political party's ideas. What do you think about these problems? Because the authority they have is very dangerous thing from my perspective. What can we do to prevent it?
Does anyone?
Since that was largely focused on, I feel like, American politics, I can answer that. I would say that the banning of Trump was an extreme situation, and I agree that right now there's power in the hands of a lot of private companies. Largely these individuals, these companies have a lot of authority over who gets to say what, and it's not a government. There's no vote. There's no, people don't get a say in that. It's these companies that do. Something that they've been practicing a little bit is this idea of freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach, where people can have these accounts and they can say what they want, but if it is something that is inspiring violence or something that may cause people harm, that they can limit that reach. And I think that's a good approach, because people talk a lot about censorship, and I feel like that question always skips over if this person has the right to incite violence against people. And when we look at that question and we come up with the answer of no, well then what do we do with that? We don't want to censor them, but we also don't want their messages to spread and encourage more violence. So yeah, these companies do have a lot of power, and there probably needs to be some more regulations. Social media has only been around for a decade, or probably longer than that, but it's relatively new, and it's something that has come about, and we are still learning how to deal with it, how to what are the best practices? Should accounts be allowed to be anonymous? Should people be allowed to say whatever they want? So I think there are definitely some questions that we still need to have answered, but yeah.
About social networks and also what you also have mentioned. Is Facebook a private company still? I'm not sure that it's a typical private company. It is something hybrid between governmental, because government also has some responsibility toward it. So it's not kind of only private company. So as to the information, information is weaponized. For example, Russia Today. Russia Today, is it a media? For me, it's not a media. It's a weapon that damages people, their health, their emotions. Should it be banned? Yes. Because if we trying to counter disinformation and constantly be on that race, people are still damaged. They are under threat. So in a wartime, yes, you cut the sources. Russians discuss it from freedom of expression perspective, and they use our discourse to damage then and pressure to use it as a pressure. So this is a hybrid warfare. In this hybrid warfare, we don't only have the military weapons, we have informational weapons. This is the reality. The challenge here is that when we see tanks and when we see really military weapons, our brain understands that this is a threat, we have to run. But when we see information, well, our brain listens to it. It's not a threat. When you have to react on it, oh, no, this damages me. We don't understand how much it damages our brain, our emotions, our physiology. Solution? Yes, solution is to ban here. If someone has responsibility and someone understands how much damage it can bring, Russia Today or that particular incident with Trump, then from my perspective, that's okay. And freedom of expression is not an absolute right, how we call it. Might be restricted in the situations when it becomes, when we have a violence. So that's big story short.
Should I also? Yeah, I mean, this is a, of course, significant question, and the authority of platforms are real, and this is an sort of an unexpected development. Nobody expected them to be so big and so powerful. So I think it's an open-ended process that I think everyone, even the companies themselves, are trying to figure out how to govern it and how to proceed. But public opinion, to some extent, at least in the Western countries, now trying to make these more accountable. There are some attempts. I mean, I believe European Union is a bit more progressive in this, in sort of forcing some pressure, pushing some pressure on these platforms. So not too hopeful, but there is some hope there. And secondly, these corporations are a different nature, have a different nature that, you know, we users are sort of creating them. There are always some mass migrations to other platforms. So if this banning or other acts, if this is very arbitrary, like now Elon Musk is doing to Twitter, then at some point they may really lose steam, and a new one may emerge. In fact, you know, I think after all, these big platforms that we traditionally know couldn't stop the rise of TikTok, which is yet another powerful platform, but not from the same country at least. So everyone is, I think, every stakeholder is trying to figure out how to do that. And there I agree with you. Information is weaponized, and there is definitely the extremist circles are abusing the democratic norms. And I think the what happened after the invasion of Ukraine is a good model that this inevitable Russian propaganda can be stopped, and it stopped to large extent. Yeah, I sort of I'm siding with the ban here, something had to be done against the Russian propaganda, and it's done. So, and also, like, for Trump, I think it was too late, too limited. I think those inciting extreme speech should not be allowed, and we should be, I think, open for that. I think they just abuse us all the time, our democratic norms, and it's time to stop. So I will stop here.
Maybe I can also add something about this. The first thing is maybe we can just separate disinformation problem and the hate speech problem, because social media organizations have very specific and more structured decision-making process about hate speech, but don't have that much on disinformation problem. And most of the time it just mixed, especially during that crisis times. So when we're talking about the whole Trump things and the whole Russian war, actually it kind of mixed. So I think finding just one solution and saying that banning is correct is actually not a correct and not a true perspective for me. So the other thing is banning and sometimes deleting the information actually creates some problem, because you are not putting truth and the true information actually people's minds. So as you said, Mariam, sometimes we skip it, but still we have a memory about this information. So we have to create new memories with the true information. So I think putting true information is a really important way. Actually, some platforms trying to do this, showing truth and working with the fact-checking organization is a meaningful way to not just deleting the information. The first thing is this. The second one is the risk of deplatforming. After you just ban Trump, but you are not just saying that the supporters of the Trump say that stay in there, but we are just banning your leader. I think it's a kind of challenging situation for the platforms, because deplatforming is a risk, because they just turn to more organized disinformation. They create more risky conspiracy theories, and the experts and the social media platforms also cannot see the risk of how disinformation or hate speech spread among these supporters. And after that, we just realize that the biggest violent events can occur. The third one is the balanced political policy-making process of platforms, because they are not doing the same things for the US and the Turkey, because they are just ban Donald Trump, but you cannot just ban Erdogan, for example, because they are not have such a strict political I don't know, understanding. So they cannot just ban or delete I know, Süleyman Soylu's hate speech on LGBTQ community, for example. So it's this imbalance among the geographical differences is really important. So I think at some point we find a way, but now it's, again, I totally agree with Erkan, it's really early stage for the making decisions on a topic, and putting everything in the same basket is not a really good way, I guess. But again, I totally agree with Erkan on the European Commission trying to push social media platforms and search engines doing something on the hate speech and the disinformation problem. So I think these kind of efforts should be just increased. Yeah, please.
We mentioned here the European Union some regulations, and in some countries, really, a European Union tried to regulate the hate speech, but it works in countries where institutions work when you have the independent court, for example. When our government in Georgia tells that, look, in Europe they have this law and we will just copy-paste it. In Georgia it doesn't work like in Germany. In Germany they have strong institutions, independent media, court and other institutions who follow the rules. The rule of law is really exists there. Well, they can afford it. As to the Georgia, when we copy-paste such kind of regulations, these regulations are used to press on opposition, to press on media, to restrict freedom of speech. So local context should be considered in every situation. And what we have in the current, a lot of people say that in America or in Europe, we have that, and you like America and Europe, why not? No, because we have to build the infrastructure for such regulations at first and prepare people and the country. And then, of course, we can add some.
Yeah, definitely. And another, okay.
Thank you very much. Hi, hello everyone. I have one question. I mean, I just want to hear your opinion on how effective in media literacy on certain type of conspiracies, because when you are defining different conspiracies, you mention it is either a type of conspiracies that can be solved by providing more scientific knowledges, or we are primarily reacting emotionally with some impulses. But some of the conspiracies is actually forming from our core belief networks, like those are the values that we acquire from families and through our life experiences. Education, online social media, the information that we consume are just a periphery of what we have in our core belief network. So some of these conspiracies are harder to change. Even if we provide scientific knowledges, they create some cognitive dissonance. So we don't want to remove that information. So then what type of conspiracies do you believe like the media literacy will be effective? And for those that really relies on our core beliefs, how one can kind of like fight against those conspiracies. If I want to give one example, like a person who comes from a more religious background, believes in some spiritual entities, maybe those groups are more likely to believe in aliens, some creatures that doesn't exist and so on. And even in the US example, like moon landing and so on, probably those are different subpopulations. So different conspiracies co-occur with each other under different demographics. So what could be the effective mechanisms to really target the conspiracies forming and rooting from these core beliefs?
Yeah, I think that's difficult. I think when we learn media literacy skills, it's really about preventing people from falling into those conspiracy theories, and that's the hope. If we give them the skills to fact check this information, that they will avoid falling into those holes. The ideas that are part of a person's being are a lot more difficult to counter. And I would say that just is exposure, traveling, meeting other people, finding diversity, and being exposed to different beliefs can help you settle some of those ideas. But I don't know if you can educate your way out of that. I think that with a lot of people that fall into conspiracy theories, they rely on their community of peers, and it becomes sort of a echo chamber where these beliefs are just repeated. So being exposed to different ideas and different people is one way to find your way out of that.
In addition to that, I think like the those, we need to have these counter narratives, and it should be social, and it should be ongoing. I don't think we can at one time persuade those core believers, especially. It's a process, and there is not a real, there is no certainty of success. But it seems that in many cases, if you provide a better explanation, an ongoing one with more trustable institutions, it has some impact. Even we probably all have anecdotal evidence that some strong believers change sides gradually. I mean, especially in Turkey now, I think I hear that there's a rise in the number of atheists, etc., which is interesting. But there might be so many different levels of impact that with your own systematic focus on these counter narratives, it might be successful at some point.
I would add that in social sciences it's very difficult to measure the one variable and the impact of one variable. For example, in media psychology, when we want to measure how media influences behavior, you cannot just put the person in a lab and tell them, okay, watch the video and we will measure it, and you will write it down, or your heartbeat, how it impacts. Because there are so many other factors that you have mentioned, demographic factors, educational level, and which values, which also are working constantly and influencing the behavior, that it is difficult to just measure separately one or another variable. Well, in natural sciences, it's easy. In chemistry or in physics, it's a science, so science-based, but that's complicated. That's complicated, and there will be still a lot of questions. And again, we rely on science, and we hope that physicists and those who work on it, they will create the tool that will help us to understand better the human brain, because human brain is not a computer. We know what is in a computer and how it works, but we still don't know how brain cells work. We still have will of power, this that we cannot explain how people make decisions. Yes, we know, but still there are so many questions. We will have it, and that's good that we have so many questions. And we are constantly in the finding of answers.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for your presentations. My question is about the new language models. Everybody has heard of it, ChatGPT, AutoChatGPT, and so on. And my question is, like, what do you think will be the, how will it affect the misinformation conspiracy theories? And also, do you see a potential to fight misinformation or conspiracy theories like that? It can also be helpful, because now it seems like a little bit like a miracle, but also really scary. And I wanted to hear your opinion on that. Thanks.
I asked ChatGPT to find, for example, some conspiracy theories on Ukraine, or I asked some question, for example. ChatGPT told me that I don't work on these topics because it's violence or it's not appropriate, conspiracy theories. So, yeah. So I use ChatGPT, but I don't know the effect. I don't know effect, but it's a fun. It's a fun. It's engaging. There are some elements of gamification. In academic world, I don't see the threats because it's a kind of Google for me. You find the information which you can find also in Google, but it's more, the speed level is different. It works really, really good in that way. Will it replace us? No, because we will more respect individual decisions, creative thinking, analytical thinking, which we are valued human beings. So, but other things, the answer is I don't know really. I also want to know. We also want to know this. We are exploring this right at the moment.
I think colleague is thinking about this a lot, Gülin. So before, after me, maybe I think she can give more examples. But yeah, it will definitely automate disinformation messages, content. I mean, I think we are already at a very advanced level. Disinformation agents work very efficiently. But now with this, I mean, it is very good, ChatGPT. It can easily create very good narratives when you give the right input. It will produce good false news, fake news. But it is again we are sort of in the middle of a struggle against disinformation with all, you know, there is this awareness, etc. So especially at the textual level, the literacy is, I mean, all of us are working on it. I mean, and this will continue, but we of course need new types of literacies. For instance, I'm less impressed with ChatGPT in this sense, that textual production, but more impressed by the Midjourney and other image making. There, you know, we are already also used to that. I mean, to some extent now we know that good fake images are already created, but creating fake images is a bit more difficult than textual production. And now everyone can do that. So we will probably be exposed to more fake images around. And maybe then, you know, we need to learn about this. And then we need to circulate this new literacy, how to detect the images. And I guess the next level will be the video production. And I'm looking for a good service, in fact, to produce videos. And probably someone before me will already produce fake news stuff, and then yeah, we will try to figure out if it is fake or not. Up to you.
Yeah, it's actually a hard one because it's still, I think we just still trying to understand how we should just navigate these kind of technologies, especially in the media sector. So, but 2 weeks ago, I was in Perugia at the International Journalism Festival, and the hot topic is AI, of course. And the thing is, I just get the important point is, actually already we use some part of the generative AI tools and techniques in the media sector, in maybe academics, I don't know. But the first mistake, I guess, when we just face such a technology is we all the time think about the risks and dangers, and it's the first thing we just came our mind. But I think, especially as a just a head of the fact-checking organization, I think we can use these technologies, generative AIs, for the very actually positive way, very meaningful ways. Actually, we just embed some part of our works already, because actually working on the truth is a hard job, and the quality journalism is not that easy, and we need time. So this kind of technology actually just give us a time to create more quality and do quality journalism. So I think the first thing is this. Of course, there's issues on the disinformation angle, and the thing is, this generative AI is just works really well. So sometimes I'm really surprised. So the problem is people already trust these tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and it works well. It works really great. So the problem is if people just don't remind themselves asking the sources, going to the first source, or just because the problem is in ChatGPT, you don't have any links, you don't have any source, but you can ask the source to the ChatGPT also. So the good thing is we can use media literacy and this critical thinking understanding using such a tools. So it's my initial response to AI. I think we need to understand, but there are also different groups talking about the risk and warning companies about just please stop a bit to just improve and develop these tools, because we are not just catching and we are not just understand what's going on and how affected the whole sectors, different sectors. For example, yesterday IBM announced that they just don't need any back office workers because the AI can do this. So the problem is we cannot catch this, so we need very long way to understand cheap fakes. We all the time talking about the cheap fakes. For example, many videos, just very simple manipulation in the videos. For example, they just delete some very small part of the speech from any politicians and spread this with the different narrative and with the different statements. So actually it's also dangerous, but of course deep fake can turn to be a very, I don't know, not detectable, very dangerous and maybe violent things. But I guess we all the time just warn people about the critical thinking idea. I think it's the best way, but not just make evil these technologies. I think we have to use this in a very clever way as a media organizations and just to find a way, but also we need to, I guess, check these companies in an ethical way also. It's also our responsibility, I guess. I know it's, yeah.
Just to add a little something to this, that for most of the AI and the ChatGPTs, I don't have a lot of concern. It'll generate more fake news more quickly. There's already sites out there that are run entirely by AI and they produce fake news. So there's just going to be more of it. And same thing with the photos, or the AI photos. They're just going to be made quicker, and there's going to be more of them, but the same general fact-checking rules apply. Whether an image is made with Photoshop or in a dark room or with AI, it's the same sort of process. You look for the source. The one thing that I am nervous about AI and ChatGPT is there's already a real distrust in the media, and one of the reasons is the human element. If I'm a reporter, I have my own biases, so how do you know I'm giving you the truth? My fear with AI is that people will use it to create fact-checking websites where they can import whatever biases they want, and people will trust that because the human element is removed. We're not at that point. Nobody's doing that yet. Elon Musk has proposed Truth GP, which he says will be the ultimate guide of truth. So it just really reinforces the idea that we need to learn critical thinking, because that is something that may eventually come down the pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can add something. In the festival, I just joined the panel, and very important and very classy journalists were there. And the moderator asked that, what do you think about the AI and all the generative images like Donald Trump, arrested photos of Donald Trump, or the Papa in the white jacket, whatever. So, and the one journalist from the Wall Street Journalism, Wall Street Journal, and she said that actually I already don't believe anything what I see, so I really don't know how this issue helped the trust in media. So the problem is actually, like you said, the problem is we already don't believe anything, and this actually not, probably we are not just fall into disinformation. Actually, we just don't trust anything anymore. The problem is this, that this kind of generative AI maybe just make people distrust everything. So yeah, maybe the most dangerous thing is, yeah.
It reminds me one slogan about journalism: when your mother tells you I love you, go find the facts about it, don't believe it. Something like that.
Hello. So I have one maybe a little bit provocative question. I would like to frame it in a way that, so European Union is famous in technology circles that the only innovation from European Union is regulations. So given that fact, and also given that fact that the companies you were mentioning all about, they are for-profit companies. I mean, the main purpose of these social media companies you mentioned and all the other ones you didn't mention, like Snapchat, and also very profitable companies to some extent. And they are entertainment companies. So given these two facts, so how do you see the next 5 to 10 years? So are we going to have something like Truth GPT, or are we going to have some non-profit, maybe UN-backed social media or digital media for journalism, so people can refer to like state media like TRT or PBS or some other state-sponsored organizations where people can look at, okay, this might be a more truthful resource other than Twitter and so, because Twitter is becoming like an entertainment company, and it can, because it's a private media company. Problem.
Views, and something that I write to counteract that will have a few thousand. So it is a huge problem, and these companies are incentivized to spread misinformation. That's really all I have for you. I don't know how that changes. I don't think that a state-backed social media company would be successful, if only because I don't think people would trust it. We saw NPR recently get booted from Twitter because they have a tiny bit of government funding, and that was enough to for people to claim that they were completely discredited. So I don't know what social media looks like in 5 years, but unfortunately, I kind of feel like it's going to be more of the same. These companies will get bigger, and they will continue to profit off of misinformation.
This is the good question to take it for further thinking. What we already know is that Facebook, for example, it already has kind of digital court system, the board, where there are governmental people from different countries, private companies, that it is already considered as semi-private organization, not a private organization, because of the influence and because of the nature and phenomena it has created. So this is a question to media lawyers also. I think that they should find some solutions and regulations, how to protect freedom of expression on the one hand, and on the other hand, to regulate it somehow, because there are some questions that emerge with technologies, of course, and there are technology lawyers who work on that. So we'll see.
Well, even if a company is for profit, I think it can be accountable to public, especially if it is a media company. And although, like big tech wanted to evade this label that they are not media companies, but in the end they are. I mean, they produce content, and especially after 2016 elections, this was a big deal. But they had to accept at some point. So yes, I mean, we cannot ignore that they are for profit, but they have this public size, public aspect. So in that sense, they will have to be accountable in principle. I know it will not be easy. And in the meantime, European Union, as you say, may be good regulators, but European Union is also a very rich market. So again, for profit reasons, even if just for this, I mean, they cannot just ignore the big market. Unlike maybe they can ignore, I don't know, some other countries, but not that one. So in that sense, I think EU can still do some things. Well, it is. It's really hard to predict 5 years even. Even we don't know what will happen in 1 year. There are some attempts, at least, to have more decentralized models, maybe more public and more also public-oriented and more like commons type. It depends on us, in fact. Like, you know, some people migrated to Mastodon after Elon Musk, but still, I don't know how many of us are using here Mastodon, which is, I think, a working alternative, at least. But it depends on us. If maybe with even more user-friendly, decentralized models, as their business models are like foundations, like the Wikipedia in another way. I mean, it's not a media company, but Wikipedia operates efficiently. And so maybe there can be some models like that. In fact, I'm surprised that I don't know why there is not one still. I think at some point we will need a social media platform that is more public and decentralized, and it will help. But we will see. For-profit companies are always more efficient, faster, and more creative until now. So we will see what happens.
Maybe I can also add very little thing. I think we need to do more advocacy on this, because I think people have some kind of sense something is wrong in this platform. But as a, I don't know, as just a user, you don't all the time think about what's going on in the background and what kind of risk I face, because you just actually just consume contents and entertain sometimes. Even they just see some political contents, they never just consume as a political content. They just see that some entertainment contents in that platform. So I think in the whole world, I guess, because there are many groups about responsible tech, like all tech is human, kind of this kind of movement actually just we have. So I think we discuss more about how they are ethically responsible against the users, and also we need some kind of advocacy to just empower the users. Again, it's really about the media literacy and the critical thinking idea, but just remind people they are responsible, and as a user, they can just say this on the platform, maybe this. And do we have, okay, but we just, please very quick, because we just have to finish.
My question is for especially Dr. Mariam. I think harmful words should be banned. The idea is as dangerous as the other authoritarian regimes, because it increases sensitiveness to opposition ideas, and it's a good opportunity for censorship. My question is, what makes difference between suppression on ideas, suppression on expressions of speech? I mean, how can people harmed by the words? Who decides it can be cause someone to harm?
Well, the point here, in my opinion, is the level of freedoms and how institutions work in the countries. So again, I will reiterate that in Georgia, if you ban or deplatform some of the politicians or you use such kind of restrictions, you might, that might be a danger for the whole media environment, or it might have a big impact. Because in the situation in America, Trump can go to the court, and we don't know, maybe after 5 years or 6 years or 2 years, he will win. That might happen. We don't know. But in countries with hybrid democracies or with authoritarian regimes, it does work like that. It works absolutely differently. So how much you trust the institutions? This is a question. If you trust the institutions, your rights will be protected. If you don't trust the institutions, it's better not, better to be very liberal regarding freedom of expression. Don't regulate hate speech, for example, in Georgia. Don't ban media outlets. I'm not talking about Russian propagandistic media outlets. They're not media outlets. This is a weapon. But as to the restriction and regulating the human rights, this is the threat, because that might be used against some groups. But again, in Germany or in other countries where they have absolutely the different standard and democratic institutions work properly, they can afford and test what regulations can be effective for better protection of human rights and freedoms. They can afford it, but not we. So in our countries, the solution is to have the freedom of expression, everything self-regulated. If it's the defamation, it's already criminalized. It's already criminalized, but as to other this wording and what you have mentioned, we should consider the local context in every situation.
Okay. Yeah, but we have a question. Sorry. So very quick, please.
I have 2 points and 1 question.
Okay.
So just one thing, very small. So one thing, we all talk about regulation, but regarding the European Union, they are still discussing what will they have. But the United States is really in the merge of having a regulation. They're not going to have a regulation there. They have a case called Gonzalez versus Google. And they will finally decide what extent the liability, the immunity of providers, social media providers, extend. So I think we can expect a decision until July. So in the United States, it will settle the question. So this is one thing. And the other thing is I heard regulation a lot today. There are regulation in terms of content of the speech. Hate speech, it's forbidden in most of the jurisdiction in Europe, including our country. Defamation, yes, it is criminalized in every jurisdiction that I know. Defamation, it is criminalized. So we don't have a problem with the content. I think the regulation that you're talking about, who decides that these things falls under this? So we have a board of radio and television. It is the ultimate content moderator in our language. Rütük, as Turks know, it's Rütük. It is the biggest content moderator in our country regarding televisions and radio. So we must discuss what if we are going to have a regulation about the content, then who decides it? I think this is what we should focus on if we are going to discuss about this. Thank you.
Absolutely. What is the practice? What is the practice, not what's written in the law, because it might be absolutely brilliant, but who executes it? Yes.
Actually, we are not in the written, not really good at in the written part, because we have a disinformation law and 3 years in jail. So yeah, we are have a very long way. Okay, please just very short.
You mentioned that information was weaponized. Not only information is weaponized, but law is as well weaponized, and we see demagogy, and that's very dangerous. And there is a moral equivalence dilemma between information and disinformation. Allocating equal time to information and disinformation might be problematic. So that's about censorship. I think it's important to distinguish between the two. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, questions, and your patience. Thank you for the all speakers and the Hrant Dink Vakfı, of course. Thanks. Thank you. Have a nice night.